everyone. Welcome to Higher PhD's ACPSS YouTube series. I'm Divya. I'm one of the volunteers at Higher PhD, and I'm very excited to be the moderator for today's ACPSS episode. Higher PhD is a non-profit organization which aims to help advanced degree holders by providing them necessary resources for a successful career transition. And ACPSS is short for Alternative Career Path Success Stories, which aims to expose our audience to the numerous career possibilities outside academia. ACPSS is one of the numerous initiatives by Higher PhD to help advanced degree holders unlock their potential and navigate career paths. So today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Conny Lin. She holds a PhD in neuroscience and currently works as a development director at Electronic Arts. I know. She will explain it how she got from PhD in neuroscience to her current role. She has experience in diverse career paths, including working as a medical science liaison for neuroscience at AbbVie, data analyst at Lureir Games, policy and legislation analyst at the College of Pharmacists, research program manager at the Rosetta Stone, and science policy fellow at the Ministry of Health of British Columbia. Besides her daytime job, she's an entrepreneur, a nonprofit consultant, and a recruiter. She was a part of initiating the first 3-minute thesis competition in Canada at the University of British Columbia and served as the president of the UBC Graduate Student Society. She also ran for member of Legislative Assembly in the 2017 BC election. Her most recent nonprofit, Higher PhD, was established to help people with PhD or master's degree navigate their careers outside of academia. Connie, could you please start off by telling us about yourself and a little bit about your academic background?
I think you have pretty much covered the highlight of it. My background, my academic background, neuroscience, let's be a little bit more narrow for our audience. It's like, we know neuroscience is not just neuroscience. My neuroscience specialty is in alcohol addiction. Well, the proper word is alcohol substance use. And I use animal model called C. elegans. Those biology people know what that is. And use animal, I make them drunk, and then use and use motion tracking system, extract their behavior data, and analyze them. That's why I'm on the big data side, and I'm also in the policy side, in the substance use, which we will talk about later.
So from your experience, I can see that you are the perfect real life example that anything is possible with your diverse background. So would you like to share your journey to policy analyst with our audience, and what inspired you to take this transition to a policy analyst?
Yeah, this is like, if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see like da on the way to now. But the policy analyst story is quite early on in my career that was super passionate about. There was that point in time, I was like, this is it. I'm gonna do it for life. This is so meaningful. And what triggers it? So you talked about I was a president of Graduate Student Society. So the story started before that. I graduated from Master of Neuroscience, and I thought I was aiming for Nobel Prize like everybody else, but I realized that's not gonna happen, not even close. So I'm like, what am I gonna do? How do I still make a dent in the universe without a Nobel Prize? I was super lost, right? And at that time, I'm already committed to doing a PhD in neuroscience, so I can't back out. And I don't want to back out because I want to get my doctorate, and I'm still very interested in research. It's just like I need something more impactful. So I started to look around in my University of British Columbia. My university, I was quite lucky. We have one of the largest number of student clubs in Canada, across all the university in Canada. So I was looking around, and I received this email saying like, oh, this College of Interdisciplinary Studies doesn't have a graduate student association, so they're recruiting volunteers to start this organization. I'm like, okay, let's try it out. And from there, I heard about some group of people within this college. The college is a collection of different graduate studies department
Yeah.
that doesn't have undergrad unit. So these people don't have opportunity to do teaching assistantship. As many of you know, most of you know, if you want to go through academic career, TA is very important experience that you want to have, at least in your back pocket, right? Just in case. And these people can't find any, but I know I will be, I don't want a TA, but I have to TA because my department doesn't have enough TA. I'm like, what is going on here? This is like different supply demand. This is not evenly distributed. So I dig. I talked to TA union. I never talked to a union in my life. And that was an experience. And then I was like, union is like, they're not, I can't help you. They're not our members. Our members are already TAs. I'm like, okay. Then I talked to graduate student society, and I just talked to everybody and realized that some policy was broken, making these people unable to do. I feel that they should have the opportunity to. So that kind of like, that's the start. And then one step up after the other, I got dragged into like, now the union people know me, now the graduate student society people know me, then they know that I like to do things. So they dragged me into many things, including eventually chairing the code and policy committee for my graduate student society, and then eventually become the president. And after the president, during the
Wow.
president, I was basically speaking on behalf of the 10,000 plus graduate students of my university across the country, locally, provincially, nationally, and in municipal level as well. So I talked to politicians before. I don't even know who they are, what all those things mean. With all that, I realized that the power of policy, how much it can impact people. I know this sounds very fake, but I think
No, not at all.
I'll tell you that one story that really touches my heart and made me want to do it is one of the grad students or my constituent, they come to the president, they're president for help. It's like, my wife is from, I forgot at the time it's Afghanistan during the wartime. My wife got in PhD program in UBC, but she can't come because of all this political thing going on. Can you write her, like, help me write a letter so to support her so we can get her in? I said, of course, and I write that letter. I forgot how many years later, I think 1 or 2 years later, that person brought the wife and saw me like, Connie, thank you so much. My wife is here because of you. Can you feel?
OMG.
Yeah, can you feel the
I
tingling, right?
I have the goosebumps.
Yeah.
I totally understand this thing. Being an immigrant, every little help, every little step, it counts. And I think what you did for that couple, it would probably be life-changing for them,
Mm-hmm. And
right?
that, I tell you, is policy work. To me,
Wow.
policy work is can do this. So that's what I realized. That's what drove me into diving into policy.
Wow, that's really inspiring. And also because sometimes people feel that, oh, I should just get into this field because, one of my seniors got into it and that person is earning well, doing well. So I'll just like get into it. But I think in case of yours, like the motivation, the driving force, I think that's a very important thing
Mm-hmm.
here. So now we know what your motivation and your experience was as a graduate student, that motivated you to become a policy analyst. But could you also share like what skills you gained as a PhD that you transferred to your policy analyst role?
I think this is quite a big question actually. I would say from my experience, I don't want to overgeneralize. Each level of the government, their policy level is has a little bit different skill set. my exposure is at the provincial level and the regulatory level. So their level of policy are different. So the higher it is, the more vague they have to be because they're higher level law. So they need to be vague. So it's more generalized. So as you go down, it's more specified. And I love the regulatory level because it feels like to me like writing protocol. If you're in science, you're writing a protocol, step 1, 2, 3, 4, don't do this, do this, that kind of like that. And not exactly, but it feels like that. And each of the line, actually, we do a lot of research on, okay, when you do an experiment, if you follow a protocol, if you invent the protocol yourself, you did a lot of research on step 1, 2, 3, each of the steps. Oh, this solution need to be mixed by what? What is this? Like each of the words is intentional, right? So that,
definitely.
being able to dissect a complex problem into specific steps and sections is a skill that PhDs and masters already have for policy. And second thing is literature review. I know the first step of policy, writing any policy, even just starting, okay, here's a project. The first thing you like the policy analysts need to do is go look for all the related policy legislation out there in the country. If there's nothing in the country that your neighbor has, if I'm writing a provincial law and then, our neighbor province doesn't have it, then I'm looking internationally. So that I feels like very much like literature review. And when you do a literature review, you need to be very intentional about your question statement, right? All that's we already trained. It feels just like that, just like what we do when we're writing a literature review paper.
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned about literature review and protocol, these are very important skills that most of us, we learn it through our PhDs and or our masters or maybe any research project that we have done in any lab. But so what do you think, like what makes people more hesitant about, expressing these skills on their CVs, or maybe what do you think is the activation barrier?
Let's say that I say what we have, and there's also another part is what we don't have. That is a two-part question, right? We can park that what we don't have later if you want to take a note.
Yeah.
And the first question that I think you're asking is, we have that skills, but how come the employer does not understand, right?
Yes.
So I always tell when I do the career advising is you need to use the audience language. Aha, like
Right.
don't we
Right.
like aha, right? I'm like, yeah, we always do that when we do our scientific or academic presentation. Resume is the same thing. Like, who is reading a resume? Use their language, not yours, right? So if they say policy research and on your resume you say literature review, they don't think it's the same thing. They don't know that's the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah,
True.
use their language. Yeah. So that's a
Yeah.
short answer for the first part. I'll let you ask
Okay.
the later part.
Yeah, sure. So just that you mention it now, using the language of the recruiters or whoever is the hiring manager. What would you say is the toughest part to transition from PhD to a policy analyst role?
So the toughest part of transitioning from academia to policy world is I think it's literal. It's from academia to policy world. The thinking is so different. Academia is exploring a question, right? We
Yeah.
often are not finding real world solutions. And our research are so contained in the bubble that we create, it's not going to impact anyone. If you did something wrong, it's okay. That's the nature of research. Policy, not the case. If you release a policy that is not so well thought out, it can impact people's life a lot. People can go to jail for a bad policy that's not reasonable, right? Well, those kind of policy won't unlikely will go into life, but it's the consequences is gigantic. That's just like go hand in hand of your impact is gigantic. Therefore, the consequences is also gigantic. That sometimes like made me a little like, oh, is this gonna work? But rest assured that policy takes a long time. I think I'm gonna tie it back to academics. A really good fit in the policy world because a lot of the people in the business world coming to policy, they going nuts because everything takes years. But academics are like, yeah, everything takes years, right? Yeah. So the years of process, what does it entail, right? First part, the research part, we already talked about. The main big part is not the writing of the policy, it's the consultation. You research what's written out there. Then what you have to research is you have different scenario, different solution. For example, um, I'm thinking to make up some law question to answer, but let's not get too specific because I don't want to talk about my previous company. Um, it's say consultation with different stakeholders. So the main part, the biggest chunk of the job is actually doing consultation. You have draft of your policy, maybe like option A, B, C, D, and then you will talk to all the stakeholders the representation of the groups that might be impacted by your policy. Then you go back and then change and then change. It's a lot of iterative process. Um, yeah, that will help you ensure that your policy, when it goes out, it's well rounded, it's being, get a lot of opinion from everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
The consultation part is where I really want to emphasize is that PhD and masters, unless you're in social sciences, that your research involved talking to a lot of people, those, the field research. For my research, I talk to my microscope. So that that for that kind of background, this will be the toughest is the consultation because you're not used to it, you're not trained for it. But I believe that PhD, masters, your training is about learning very fast and be able to adapt very fast. So I'm sure you will be able to do it if you want to. But just if I say there's a pros and cons, if you don't like to talk about a lot of people and a lot of people whining to you about what your proposal is total not good, it might not be your thing. But for me, is fulfilling. It's very interesting. It's looking at all those different stakeholders. They all have different perspective. That made me like, oh, I never thought of it that way. That's interesting to me. But so if you like that and then you like to solve that kind of problem, this is for you.
Yeah, true. Like, thank you for sharing this very important part because more than I think the hard skills, a lot of soft skills that you have just mentioned, they play a major role in deciding like what career path is a person most suited for. So, since we are on the topic of pros and cons, could you list the pros and cons for any academic who wants to transition to policy analytics? What should they look out for?
So let's start with the pros, and then you ask me again about the cons, okay? Pros, I think usually the policy jobs are government jobs, and in at least North America, I'm not as well versed in Europe, but usually when the government jobs are more secure, right? So you have good pension. It's not like, oh, it's more comfortable. I will not say it's not a lot of work. It's actually a lot of work. It's a misconception out there that government workers are lazy. That's wrong. All my people that I see, my coworkers, they work really hard. Yeah, so that's a pro. And the impact, right? So the impact is unparalleled. I feel of all the industry that I've been into, policy is still the biggest impact. When you push things out, you're like, oh my God, I'm saving people's life, or oh my God, I'm changing people's life. Yeah, can you imagine like just immigration law that people that you can resonate with? You fix something
Oh
that
my
make
God.
your life a lot easier, right? That impacts so many people's life. That's a great thing I like. And then I feel, and you don't need to do wet labs. Like,
Oh my God.
I know a lot of people are done with wet lab. It's not paper lab. You're talking to people lab, like it's not about like mixing chemicals. And then if you like people, you like interesting people, that's a big pro. Yeah.
And so, what you would say are the cons of the job? What should one be aware of before committing to this profession?
Um, Number one, if you don't have patience, policy is definitely not for you. I am serious. I don't. But I feel like master and PhD, you probably develop a lot of resilience to being patient. So I think you'll be fine. Okay. Um. So the policy process is, you need to understand it's so long for a reason, because it impacts so many people if it's really wrong. There's so many checkpoints. That's why it's long. Like, please don't say like, it's so inefficient, but it's there for a reason. I think about all the efficiency that we put in, and like, nope. Sometimes you put in some efficiency point and make it unsafe, then you need to balance that. So that's a long-winded answer to the first. You need pro is, the con is it takes too long. And the second thing is, you're not gonna make everybody happy. I think in academia, not everybody has experienced that. It's really, our world is, if you're a lab kind of researcher, you're not making your animal happy, they bite you. I don't know. But in policy, if you are in top policy, like I did substance use policy, that's a very hot policy. People will strike. Like, they don't strike, they will protest outside, they will block your road, they'll do things that you feel sometimes your life is threatened. It's not always like that. I'm saying extreme case, but I want you to know what it can be, right? So you decide based on what the worst case scenario can be. But still, like, that did not deter me, because I know in my heart I am trying to do the best for them. The people who are protesting, I am actually trying to use the best scientific based evidence policy to make the best for everyone. So my heart, I feel I'm right, but not right. Like, I feel I'm comfort that I'm doing the right thing. And for so that didn't bother me. But if that bothers you, that's not gonna be something you like. Policy world, you will never be able to make everybody happy. That's just the nature of policy. Yeah. So I think those two are the biggest.
Thank you so much for sharing the cons because, as you mentioned, patience is the key. And if someone is not good with this, then they won't find the career as fulfilling as others.
It might
So
be
thank you so much
deter
for
them.
this.
Yeah, it might deter them. Yeah. It yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it
but I
doesn't bother
totally
me.
agree.
Yeah, but
But
it
yeah,
can
I
bother
totally agree
people.
with you.
Yeah.
True, true. It can bother people, and I think PhDs are trained for this kind of a pressure, I would say, where first of all, they have to learn totally different techniques or a totally different experiment. Like this was not in the project, but now they have to do it because it makes sense now at this stage. And then they have to learn everything, consult with others, and yeah, so all these skills I think PhDs do pick up while their studies. But as you mentioned, the language they need to use in the resume is what the recruiter or the hiring manager is most familiar with.
So world is really trying to do evidence-based policy. That's what policy is always trying to do. But because we deal with people, we deal with different political environments, there are so many outside forces that sometimes when you look at the evidence from research and you cannot write it like that in the policy. You cannot use it sometimes because of the political landscape. Whatever research is a utopia land, it's idealistic land. You cannot carbon copy it into the real world. And for academics, sometimes that's very, very hard to first to accept. And then second to sometimes comprehend. I still struggle with it. I would be half of my brain. I will feel like, okay, I understand why we cannot use this because if we write this like pure research, oh, this is gonna be work policy into the real world, it won't work anyway because people won't use it. I still the other half of the brain, I will be like, why not? It's just like it's a constant struggle within my brain, and you have to learn to accept that. That's a con, another con.
Thank you so much for sharing this. And yeah, I think because we are so used to following protocols, following the theories and the equations, that this acceptance can take some time. Yeah. So, since you have shared the pros and cons, I'm going to ask you a very cliche question. What does a typical day of a policy analyst look like?
Hmm.
What
Yeah,
is
that
your experience?
actually this is a good cliche question to ask because before I entered the job, even though I did a lot of like volunteer policy, so this is actually you might want to cut this in somewhere. Um, so how I got the job is not because I already have policy experience. It's because I volunteer for a lot of the policy stuff and I actually have like concrete experience doing policy. Um, so, so day to day, I think is I like routine and I feel like policy analyst is more of the job that I feel I can have a routine. I know a lot of the other jobs that I talk about, my current job right now, no routine. It's like blah. But policy, I will go in, check my emails, and then there everybody would. Sometimes we have a rotation duty of answering the constituents questions, legislation questions, and then I will have my project. So each person will typically get assigned a few policy project, and I will look at each stage, which stage of that project's at, and I perform that. So it can fall into buckets um, like I mentioned before, doing literature review, right? Look at where the problem statement is. It could fall into I'm making a gigantic chart of all the legislation in the world that's related to the policy. That few sentences I'm trying to amend. And I like sheets, so if you like spreadsheet, you'll be fine. And another big part of it is running consultation meetings. So those are big. Sometimes if your stakeholders are, lack of better words, they're higher rank, then getting them together in one room is a gigantic event affair. And then you prepare a lot of the documentation. That gigantic spreadsheet that I talked to you about is part of the preparation. So you in that meeting you'll go through, okay, amendment number one, the proposal is option A, option B. What do you think? Do you think A is better or B is better, or do you have other ideas? So in that meeting, you go through like one by one. That's at least what I did. There are other ways to do it too. And a lot of writing. If you don't like writing, this might not be your thing. But I find policy writing is a lot less than the creative writing, which I'm not very good at. So yeah, Meeting, meeting, meeting.
Thank you so much for showing us what a typical day looks like because it would help our audience to picture if they are interested in doing this thing repeatedly day after day because it might be boring for some people, but some people actually enjoy the serenity of the routine and following instructions and everything. So yeah, thank you so much. I think it will really help the audience the way you have explained it. It's really
Mm.
useful. So next I would like to ask you, do you have like any tips for the employers who are looking for candidates to hire for policy analysts? And I think one of the biggest questions that candidates have is when they don't come from a social sciences or a humanities background, how do they even like get their resume to the hiring manager so that they are considered for the position of a policy analyst?
I think if you, this is not a field. I'll be just very straightforward here. Policy analyst is not a field you can just barge in. You need some experience. Nobody will hire you if you have zero. Okay, so as I mentioned, my experience, my first experience is colon policy in a graduate student society. During that time, I actually well, I was leading to do an overhaul of our complete bylaw and policy manual. That was not a small document. And guess what? My policy analyst job at the College of Pharmacists, it was overhauling bylaw. So this is from the beginning to the end. In the middle, I did since ever since I did that policy started there, many years like all I have not stopped doing policy work for nonprofit, and then I also had a science policy fellowship at the Ministry of Health. That is basically my stamp of approval of I I can do policy. I'm actually hired to do policy for a year in the Ministry of Health with a scholarship. So you cannot, this is not something you can just barge in. You want to look for things like the science policy fellowship that I mentioned. If you're in the States, there are a lot more of these programs in the States. In Canada, it's fewer, but we can put it in the YouTube link of where you can find them. If you don't have opportunity like that in your own country, volunteer. Every single nonprofit have bylaws that you can try help them fix, and bylaw is always broken. It's never perfect state. So it's the concept of opportunities. Please don't just like think you can just, oh, I'm a scientist, I want to be a policy. No, you don't have the skills yet. You need to have some hands-on experience, and it's not that hard to get.
Explain a bit more about how, as PhDs or as working scientists, what are the ways that a person can get some experience in a field that that person might be interested in?
I mentioned before that, so if you want to get in, my first advice is start volunteering. I cannot emphasize volunteer more. For almost 3 years now, ACPSS series was run virtually. Every single speaker, guest speaker that we have, you ask them what's the important thing to build the skills to let them step out of their current field is volunteering. Because volunteering, you get to do something you're not really qualified for, and you gain the experience from there. You will not be able to do that. Like you, the job when I, I'm a recruiter too, so I know when I look for job candidate, I'm looking for people who can do the job on day one. I'm not looking for people who's I have to train them. Oh, I never had experience. Like why? I'm paying for you. So get your experience from volunteering. And I said the easiest way is to go to nonprofit. Most of the nonprofit they have some policy manual, they have bylaws. If they don't, even better because then you can do more. Say, hey, can I help you write out your policy manual, right? So you start from there. You build out experience, and I tell you, my hands-on experience. Don't undervalue those experience. When I had my real job at the college writing those bylaws. My experience running the whole project of overhauling the bylaw of the graduate student society, I actually know inside out how to lay this project out. Other people who are actually my peers and master in public policy, they're actually trained for the job, but they didn't have my hands-on experience, so they didn't actually know when the project actually they run it theoretically, right? When it actually operationally, what you need to do, like how do you track each person's version, like we have to figure all that out. Volunteer experiences, please start there, and then you get more and more and more from there.
Thank you. So I think we should wrap this episode up. But before we end, would you like to say something to our audience, like to motivate them or to inspire them a bit more?
I think if you are at the stage, like I think at the start I said, oh, I want to make a dent in the universe, but I couldn't win a Nobel Prize. If you're that kind of person, policy is for you, because you really have that innate drive to help people to make a difference for the world. Then really policy can get you that feeling, that Nobel Prize you couldn't get, but you actually could get the same feeling. I feel even better. Yeah. And I feel it's quite fitting to what academics already do. So you won't feel like you're out of the water. um yeah, please give it a shot.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your insights and for sharing your journey with us today. And I'm sure it would benefit a number of people out there who want to make a transition in their career but are hesitating for one or the other reason. So thank you, Connie, for sharing these things with us today and much.
Thank you. Bye bye.